I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is Ring of Fire. Billionaire conservatives are trying to tighten their grip on traditional media outlets, and we'll tell you what that's going to do to the flow of information in America. And American workers are being hammered by their employers. We'll take a look at how corporate CEOs are able to get away with paying their employees less than the minimum wage. And America's regulatory agencies have become completely taken over by the industries that they're supposed to regulate. We'll talk about why the FDA's revolving door is hazardous to your health. We'll have all that and more coming up. And right now, you've just entered the Ring of Fire.
You can't change Washington from the inside. You can only change it from the outside.
Grand jury secrecy rules.
For political gain.
The press can find out.
That has nothing to do with politics, but go ahead.
It wouldn't bother me.
Oops.
The billionaire Koch brothers, the geniuses who helped bankroll the Tea Party movement, are trying to buy up media outlets across the country. If they're successful, they'll be able to spread their anti-consumer lies to millions of Americans. I have Howard Nations and Mike Burg with me now to talk about the conservative takeover of the media. Well, guys, it looks like the Koch brothers, they want to control politics by way of PAC money. They want to control the courts by way of packing the court system with their favorite kinds of judge. Now they want to really embrace, as much as they can, the media. They don't think it's enough that Rupert Murdoch is out there with Fox News. They don't think it's enough that you have, as we sit here and speak, for every 6 minutes, there is of progressive talk or progressive media in America, there is 3 hours of conservative media. So now the Koch brothers come on the scene and they say, hey, that's not enough for us. We want to buy up all the newspapers. Howard, let me begin with you. What is your take on this?
Well, in 2010 at a convention, the Koch brothers announced a 3-pronged 10-year strategy. And their goals in it are smaller government, less regulation, and less taxation. The part that they're looking at here, which is very big, is less taxation. This is they're grassroots activists. Their 3 goals are grassroots activism, influencing politics, but then their 3rd goal was to control the media. And this is such a dangerous thing. If you look at what they've done in the past, in the things that they buy into and what they control, a quick example is what they did at Florida State University when Florida State sold to the devil in exchange in 2008 for millions of dollars, contributed to their economic department.
The Koch brothers did, yeah.
The Koch brothers contributed money,
right.
And when they got into Florida State, they were financing multiple seats for new faculty members. Well, when you do that normally, that's just donated money. What they did is they controlled the hirings, and they denied 60% of the faculty members that were to be hired within the university. They reviewed all public materials, and they reviewed all publications, and they maintained the right to withdraw if they were not happy with the results that they were getting from the publications.
Ayn Rand had to be taught at FSU. You can't teach anything about global climate change. You have to teach the economics of deregulation. That's the Koch deal. Now, Michael, let me ask you this. What are the newspapers, what is the media that's targeted by the Koch brothers right now as we speak?
Well, they're looking to buy the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, the Baltimore Sun. What's interesting about this is we go back to history in the 30s. We know in Germany, if you control the media, you control the propaganda, you're able to sway public opinion and basically control the thoughts of people. But there's really a 2-pronged thing they're going to accomplish here. They're going to do that, but the other thing is these are in places where Obama and the Democrats have done really well. In Illinois, in Chicago, in Baltimore, in Los Angeles. These are also unionized papers. What I see happening if they buy them, they're going to break the unions. They're going to fire as many people as possible. They're going to put their own people in there. They're going to actually destroy those papers and bring them all up and resurrect them in their conservative bent to try to put out propaganda to try to continue to rule this country with the corporate entities controlling government.
Well, Howard, let me ask you right now, if they accomplish what they want, it's not just that they're going to control these papers. What they're going to control is the narrative and the dialogue that spans as many newspapers as possible. In other words, you create the talking points on the editorial page of the LA Times, for example. That's
right.
Picked up by all of the other feeder the feeder newspapers and feeder media. Isn't that where they're headed, just to control? For example, regulations, deregulation. What would they do with that?
Well, their idea is to distort science on deregulation. They are very heavily financing now the fake scientific studies that regard climate change as a hoax. The reason they do that, and the reason they're so big on deregulation, is because they are the 5th largest air polluters in the United States. Their industries include fertilizer, fracking, coal, chemical plants, things of that nature. And we can see from just what happened a few days ago in Texas what happens with deregulation. In the Texas fertilizer plant explosion, there were 15 people killed and 200 injured. 10 of the people killed were first responders. That fertilizer plant was classic deregulation, which is brought about by Governor Perry. He goes around the country bragging about how come to Texas where business is not regulated. Well, there had been no inspection of that plant since 1985. And they also are required to report to Homeland Security. They had never reported to Homeland Security that they were stockpiling that much fertilizer in one location. So this is the type of consequences that you get when you get no business regulation. Now what you have to ask yourself is this: would newspapers which are currently coming out and criticizing Perry and criticizing deregulation, would those papers now be doing the same thing, and would they be investigating that explosion if they were owned by the Koch brothers?
If I were to say what is the brand of the Koch brothers, understand the old man Koch was an evil little character. I mean, he is the guy that fought civil rights at every turn. He's the same guy that, you know, day in, day out was trying to build the John Birch Society. But when you take a look at the heart of what the Kochs have stood for, it is hate. I mean, there's no other way. It is a hate train, Michael. And what I'm wondering is, haven't we seen this pattern with these hate groups? You know, it started off with the Tea Partiers, and everything coming out of their mouth was, you know, basically attacking the have-nots of this country, attacking Obama, it was constant attack and constant hate. You'd see them in line with their signs of Obama depicted as a monkey, Obama depicted as Hitler, and the message was always hate. The Koch brothers paid for that. What makes you think anything's going to be different when they own the newspapers, Michael?
Well, there won't be anything different. As you said, in the father, who was really the founder of what they've done here, said that the black man was nothing more than a communist plot to overtake America. The reality is that they're going to continue to preach hate. They're putting their money in, and they have so much money, into ALEC, which we've talked about previous on this show. They're putting their money in deregulation. They're putting their money in making sure that our environment is not clean, and in fact, they are one of the largest polluters in the world. The hate that they're going to continue to spew out of these newspapers and through the organizations that they've cloaked in legitimacy will continue to happen in this country. And America should be warned that this is what their agenda really is.
Well, Howard, we have seen this. We have seen when they've taken over. You pointed about Florida State University. It's barely, I don't even know how you call it a university where you have any free thinking now, because now it is the University of the Koch brothers, because the Koch brothers at Florida State University are telling them what to say, how to say it, who to hire, who to fire, what they can teach in their textbooks. And so what we see happening here is it's more, we've seen them time and time again when they take over a company, they fire the people who disagree with them. Now, can you imagine going to the LA Times and firing the editorial page, because the people, the writers on that editorial page are not going to agree with anything that the Koch brothers have to say. They've investigated the Koch brothers time and time again for all types of scams that the Koch brothers have carried out throughout this country. So what's going to be different here? I mean, they're going to go in, they're going to fire, they're going to rehire people that are nothing more than parrots. Is that journalism?
Well, as indicated by Clarence Page with the Chicago Tribune, one of the finest African-American editorial writers in America, he's indicated that he simply couldn't work for the Koch brothers. Just as it was very interesting that when this story circulated among editorial boards all over the country, how many people were afraid to comment. These are journalists, but they were afraid to use their name in commenting on what they thought about the Koch brothers taking over the newspapers. And another indication was the fact that when asked, they said they thought they would rather have Rupert Murdoch buy the paper than the Koch brothers. Now, what does that tell you? Look what Rupert Murdoch just went through in England. The editorial boards would rather work for Rupert Murdoch.
Criminal conduct in the
Absolutely.
UK, where he's tapping people's phone. He's involved in absolute criminal conduct, Rupert Murdoch. And these newspaper people say, look, give me Rupert Murdoch above the Koch brothers, because I guess it's a different brand of crime. Michael, it's not just the newspapers. We also see One America News Network that's coming up. It's being paid for by one of the wealthiest right-wing neocon nut billionaires in the country, that says that we need more than Fox News out there spewing hate. So they're going to start the One America News Network. Now, here's the point. Liberals, and I got about a minute, tell me what is your gut feeling? Why don't liberals do the same thing? Why are we so unwilling to start our own networks and jump behind the media? Why don't we see that?
Well, one of the problems is we don't have the financial wherewithal. We're individuals, like we've been talking about, who can go in and buy newspapers, start a brand new television station. Most of what goes on the liberal side is grassroots. And to be able to do that, we have to have, number one, the fire to do it. We got to raise the money to do it. We got to get people interested so we can have some balance in this country. What they want to do is they want to make Fox News the moderate. They want to make them the middle. And we all know that's crazy. Absolutely not. They're going to go.
Howard, have you seen unwillingness in about 20 seconds, an unwillingness by the liberal political movement to jump behind media?
Yes, there's a definite unwillingness and reluctance to do so. And unfortunately, the nature of the beast is that people like the Koch brothers, who have so much money, have it because they don't want regulation. They want to be able to move unrestrained. And that's the type of people that are putting their money into the right wing, because the right wing, when they say small government, they mean government we can control and that will not regulate us and not tax us. And that's where the money goes.
All right, guys, thank you. Very important story. It's one we have to keep up with because it's going to continue to grow as a problem with our democracy. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Just ahead, we'll take a look at why raising the minimum wage will help bolster our economy. We'll be right back with more Ring of Fire. Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. When you hear the words minimum wage, you probably think of high school kids working at fast food joints. But the reality is more and more adults are having to work for minimum wage just to be able to feed their families. I've got Farron Cousins from the Trial Lawyers magazine with me now to talk about the truth of minimum wage workers. Farron, when you hear the Republicans talk about minimum wage, they almost give you the impression that the only people who are affected by low minimum wage are the people that work at the flipping hamburgers or the corner soda shop. You know, it's kind of this leave it to Beaver kind of thing that, gee, it's only those people who are affected by minimum wage. Nothing is farther from the truth, is it?
Well, that's correct. And they tell us that because they want to be able to distance everyone else from the problem. They tell us it's the 15 and 16-year-olds that are just working, flipping burgers, trying to get money to pay for gas or to go to the movies on the weekend. But that's not the case. In fact, over 80% of people working for minimum wage are adults, and the majority of those are single parents trying to support a family. And when you're working minimum wage full-time, you're making roughly $15,000 every year, which is about $8,000 below the poverty line. You can't support a family on that. And
well,
this myth
Farron, let me ask you this: what? Some people, obviously, if you look at the numbers, we have so many people working 2 and 3 jobs just to stay above the poverty line. And as we hear the Republicans tell it, those people aren't really affected. Those people are getting paid absolutely great wages. That's a lie, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And you know, they'll tell us things like, you know, these people are unemployed or they're underemployed or they're working minimum wage because they're not skilled or because they've screwed up somewhere in their life. This is what they deserve. And what that is that's just a further continuation of this victim blame, the same thing they do with rape victims. These people deserve this in their minds. And the reason they do that is it's a defense mechanism. They don't want to think that this could happen to them. They've got their job, they went to college, they're doing well for themselves, everyone else is failing because they didn't. They don't want to think that they could come into work one day and the company says, guess what? We're shutting down, or your position is no longer there. And so they do this so they don't have to face the reality that it could happen to them. And that's what happened
and
when the recession started.
Farron, obviously, you're not just saying that. There have been studies that have talked about the idea of this defense mechanism. Gee, if it were me, I would know, I would have a better job. If it were me, I wouldn't be in that situation. If it were me, I wouldn't be having to work 2 jobs to feed my family because I'm so damn much smarter than everybody else. And the studies show that's how we get around the point of actually showing compassion for other people. Now, it's not just women have really been victimized in the minimum wage arguments, haven't they?
Absolutely. And it's, again, most minimum wage workers are female. Most of them are white, which, again, the Republicans want to tell you that this is an African American or minority problem. Well, guess what? The majority of minimum wage workers are white. Now, African Americans and other, Latinos are overly represented in minimum wage workers, but again, the vast majority are white. So you can't throw out this race-baiting issue like they often try to do, because they will actually tell you, Fox News is great with this, and the American Enterprise Institute, they'll tell us that minimum wage is racist, that it's crowding out other African Americans who want these minimum wage jobs. Because again, it goes back to they want these jobs. They don't want to work hard. They love getting their government welfare check every month, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, you know what's so ugly about that argument? It's kind of the Jonah Goldberg argument, isn't it? Jonah Goldberg made it, when you hear him talk about minimum wage, he says, I'm only against paying people more money because if we do, it's really going to victimize African Americans. And Jonah Goldberg is anything but a person who cares at all about minorities or African Americans. 99.9% of his writing is a direct or indirect attack. But at the same time, he's attacking the minorities. He's saying, gee whiz, I'm only making this minimum wage argument because I'm worried about them. Isn't that kind of what we hear pitched on Fox News? The whole Murdoch machine pitches it. The Koch brothers pitch it. And it's such a ridiculous argument that seems to sell to the American public.
Absolutely. And they use that again because they're trying to distance themselves from the issue. They're trying to distance average Americans from the issue. They don't want us to believe that raising the minimum wage would be good for all of us. And just about a month ago, every single Republican in the House, along with 7 Democrats, voted against a minimum wage increase. During his State of the Union address this year, President Obama mentioned that he would like to see the national federal minimum wage raised to $9 an hour, which is a very modest increase when you consider the fact that the minimum wage has lost 30% of its value since 1965. There have only been 3 federal increases since 1965. And they will tell us also that corporations will, even though they're profitable, even though over the last 4 years their profits have climbed 124%, they can't afford it. But they're not even
they're holding $3 trillion worth of money right now that they still won't spend. Isn't part of the argument also, Farron, that we're hearing this just absurd argument that, gee whiz, this is kind of a Goldberg, Fox News argument too, is the real people that we're trying to look out for are mom and pop businesses. How much of a lie is that? This is not a mom and pop business issue at all, is it?
It absolutely is not. And it goes back to, I love the way Ed Schultz says it, we can't go after the job creators, because that's exactly what they think these corporations are. But if you really think about it, the job creators in America are the minimum wage workers. When a minimum wage worker, or even somebody making above the poverty level that's not in the top 10%, they live paycheck to paycheck. So they take their paycheck and they spend probably 100% of it every single paycheck. They're spending it on food, on housing, on gasoline, clothing, whereas the wealthy spend roughly 5%. So when these minimum wage workers go out and they spend that money, that creates jobs. If I go to McDonald's today or every day and keep ordering food, they have to meet with that demand. Spending money creates demand, which creates jobs.
The difference is, Farron, as you've covered so many times in the stories you've done, the difference is we always want to believe that we can build from the top down. Right. Ronald Reagan came in, let's build from the top down. If we build at the top, everything's going to be fine at the bottom. We know that's a lie. We know what it did to the job market. We know what it did to the economy. We know what it did to the attitude of the American worker. And so isn't it time that we listen to the economists who say, no, what you do is you build from the bottom up, and you do that by empowering people at the bottom. You give them a wage that they can live, where they can feed their family, right?
Absolutely. I think it's very telling that David Stockman, one of the chief architects of Reagan's trickle-down, has come out in the last few years and said, whoa, we made a big mistake. Trickle-down does not work in any form. And so, there was a great study out of the University of California, Berkeley, back in the early 90s during the Bush 1 recession. They looked at 2 states over 2 years, New Jersey and Pennsylvania. New Jersey raised their minimum wage by 20%. Pennsylvania did nothing. And over the span of 1 year after raising that minimum wage, New Jersey saw a 5-point increase in employment. Pennsylvania, on the other hand, left their minimum wage as it was. They saw a 2-point drop in employment, and their overall economy shrank.
That's a startling picture right there, and it's repeated itself many times throughout the country. But nevertheless, you have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce doing a couple things. A, they're lying to mom and pop by telling mom and pop businesses that they have anything at all in common with mom and pop business. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is run by 19 mega international companies. Has nothing to do with mom and pop. This idea that they run the corner hardware store or the corner restaurant has nothing to do with what goes on with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is coming at the minimum wage issue on behalf of people like Staples, a huge company,
right.
or Yummy Foods or McDonald's, these huge corporate types that do everything they possibly can to destroy the possibility of increasing wages. It's not mom and pop, it's these mega corporations. Then they employ thousands of people. They're making more money than they can spend right now. They have so much money in the bank, they don't even know what to do with it. But they're saying, gee whiz, we're there for mom and pop businesses. No, they're there for themselves. 19 businesses completely fund the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. That's where they get all of their money. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce lied to the American public by telling the American public that 200,000 businesses actually give them money to further their cause. That's a lie. We found out it was a lie. They did the numbers. It was primarily from 19 mega corporations that have the say in things like minimum wage, right?
Right, absolutely. And you know, 94% of businesses in America, be it the mom and pop on the corner or the massive corporations like Walmart, 94% of these corporations are profitable every year. So they do have the money. And let me tell you this, every month, roughly, inflation increases prices by 0.2%. Now, if we were to raise the minimum wage to $9 an hour like President Obama wanted to, you know what that would do to price increases? With inflation, it would go 0.21. So we're talking about a 1/100th of a cent price increase on goods and other services sold in order to pay for this minimum wage increase. And that doesn't even begin to count the economic boom that would occur from giving low-wage employees more money. Because again, they're going to take that money, they're going to spend it, they're going to create more jobs. But these massive corporations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce represents, they're not looking ahead. They're looking at the end of the day, if we raise the minimum wage, we have to pay more money. Yeah, that's true. But look what's going to happen in 6 months from now when your company is making even more money because people have more money to spend. They don't look at the long-term picture, and that's the problem not only with corporate America, but the Republican Party in general. It's all me, my,
well,
now.
Farron, the truth is this president could have done more. Can you imagine having, did you tell me, 7 Democrats voted against minimum wage? In the old days, a president would walk into those 7 Democrats' office and say, you know what? You can vote against me on this, but you're going to suffer because of it. And the problem is we have a president that simply does not have the backbone to do that, doesn't have the willingness to fight on issues like this. But you know what? It's up to the media to talk about it. Farron Cousins, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the other side of the wage issue, specifically the overpaid Wall Streeters who provide nothing in value for our country. I'm Mike Papantonio. You're watching Ring of Fire. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, host of Ring of Fire on Free Speech TV. The corporate-controlled media rakes in millions of dollars in profit every year by telling you only part of the story. They're at the mercy of their corporate sponsors, and they refuse to take on corporations that defraud, kill, maim, and harm consumers. So for every 3 hours of conservative talk on the air, there's only about 6 minutes of honest progressive talk. To make matters worse, court rulings have told us that the media outlets can legally distort or censor news at their whim. You see, FCC guidelines for honest reporting aren't actually the laws in the United States. In short, the media is legally allowed to lie and to hide the truth from American citizens, even when public health and safety are at stake. The problem is that when you have media outlets owned by corporate interest, every talking point delivered by that network is going to be to the benefit of those corporate interests. Here at Free Speech TV, we don't have shareholders. We don't have to answer to corporate America, and we don't pull any punches because of that. Our loyalty is to the viewers, and our viewers are the ones that help keep Free Speech TV alive. You do that. We need your help. We need your donations to make sure that we continue to deliver what you want and need, and that is the truth. Free Speech TV doesn't take corporate money, and that's why your financial support is so important to us. Viewer voices fuel Free Speech TV and drive many of the program decisions. Your support helps keep information flowing. It helps hold things together. We can hold corporate media accountable only if we have a voice to do that. And right now, Free Speech TV is one of the few voices out there that is going to tell the story regardless of what corporate America wants us to say. I'm Mike Papantonio, and I'll be with you every week telling you the truth that you will not hear on corporate media. Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. Last year, the top 10 hedge fund managers in America made an average of $1 billion apiece. Meanwhile, the average wage for America's workers has been steadily declining for more than a decade. I'm joined now by Les Leopold, author of the new book, How to Make $1 Million an Hour. He's going to explain why bankers and hedge fund managers are able to reward themselves while stifling worker pay. Les, the new filthy rich list is out, and there's no surprise about what it showed in America, is it? What was your takeaway from it?
Well, what blew my mind was that the top guy earned as much in 1 hour as the average family earned in 21 years. How is that possible? And you could if you took the top 10 on the rich list, these hedge fund guys, the amount of money they make in a year, you could hire almost 200,000 registered nurses. Something is very, very wrong in the way our economy is structured.
What we've done, Les, and your book is so good on this. I mean, everything you write tells us this story, and it is that in America, what we've done is we have glorified these hedge fund cats up on Wall Street without really understanding their game. In other words, we've seen them on the front of Newsweek magazine and Time magazine. Fortunately, those magazines are going by the wayside. Maybe progressive media will take a better look at what these guys actually do. But it's not a very pretty thing we do. They're not geniuses, first of all. They don't make anything. They don't build anything. They don't really add anything to our economy that's tangible. But they have all kinds of scams they use to make this kind of money, don't they?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We get caught up in a tautology that says, because they're rich, they must be producing value for the economy because they're rich. And if you look at it closely, not only do they not produce any value, many of them, a good bunch of them produce negative value for the economy. They were directly involved in the crash that we're still suffering through right now. They are directly responsible for a lot of the unemployment that we face because of the games that they were playing.
So what we did is we bought into the Gordon Gekko model that greed is good. The corporate media, of course, they agree greed is good. The politicians that take their money from Wall Street, they agree that greed is good. But they never ask the question, really, how bright are these people? We want to think they're just brilliant, almost rocket science kind of caliber, but really the only way they're able to survive is by gaming and scamming the system. Let's go down the list with me, because I tell you, Les, I have followed many authors that have followed Wall Street. I don't think there's anybody better in the business in understanding what's happened here than you. And there's some obvious things. For example, we know about insider trading, but talk about it. That is one way these guys look like geniuses, but all they're doing is scamming the system, right?
Look, if you know something is going to happen in a corporation before the public does, you can't lose money. As a matter of fact, these guys don't really like to bet. What they do is they want a sure thing. They want a rigged bet. And insider trading is the best form of a rigged bet. It's very hard to catch somebody. Somebody whisper. You can bribe somebody quite easily without anybody ever finding out. And the prosecuting attorney, they've caught 70 guys so far in 9,000 out of 9,000 hedge funds. And the prosecuting attorney, federal attorney, he's starting to say that he thinks that these guys operate not just a few bad apples in a barrel, but that the whole hedge fund game is based on a corrupt business model. That's his phrase, corrupt business model. We should take that very serious.
Well, we occasionally see one of them. The Department of Justice actually does their job, and they take them to court, and they try him as a criminal. And occasionally we'll see a prosecution. I'm looking to see, right now you have Steve Cohen, who's kind of under the gun. His employees, for example, he's a billionaire hedge fund guy, and his employees are now being targeted. And the way to target these people is to begin at the bottom and work your way up. Isn't it that's how they go after organized crime? They actually start at the bottom and then they work their way up. Isn't that what we see occasionally by the Department of Justice, but certainly not enough?
Right, and they're catching some of the top guys on wiretaps, through emails, and it's very unclear how many are involved. It could be hundreds, if not thousands, of hedge funds that are playing this game. But the one that really gets me, the most destructive one I've come across, which hasn't been prosecuted, is designing a financial security so that it can fail and you can collect the insurance.
Okay, explain that. We know the Goldman Sachs kind of story, but most people don't understand what happened. They don't understand what Goldman Sachs actually did, and they don't understand why in the hell the Department of Justice would let it happen. I mean, explain the story.
Oh, this is so unbelievable that when I first came across this, I thought, no, this can't be. A hedge fund teamed up with Goldman Sachs, and the hedge fund went out and found the worst mortgage pools that he could find across the country, in Nevada, in Arizona, in Florida. And they packaged them all together, and then they sold it as if it were a really good thing to invest in. These three big institutional investors put up $1 billion for this particular security. Meanwhile, the hedge fund guy bet that it would fail. And the sooner it failed, the more money he would make. And it did fail. Of course, he put the worst ponies in the race. Of course they were going to finish last. The institutional investors lost $1 billion. The hedge fund guys made $1 billion.
So really what was happening on day one, they're telling, and understand, this is mom and pop investors. These are pension programs. These are municipal organizations that are being scammed here. They're telling mom and pop that this is a great investment for your retirement program. Now, while they're telling mom and pop that, they are out in the back door. They're secretly buying an insurance policy that says when this fails for mom and pop, we're going to be paid money from this insurance policy. Isn't that how it works?
Yeah. But guess what? The insurance policy was the investor's money. It's not like there's some third party involved. The $1 billion the investors put up, that's the insurance policy. That's the insurance policy.
But
this is what they did to the 5 school districts in Milwaukee that lost $200 million. This is what J.P. Morgan Chase did with a big hedge fund called Magnetar. This is what Citigroup did. This is what they all did at the height of the housing bubble to try to get rid of their garbage.
How can you ever, Les, how do you even believe your investment counselor? How do you ever go to a broker? Because the broker down at the bottom, in other words, this takes place in Wall Street, but down at the bottom in middle America, the broker doesn't know all of this. The broker didn't know, for example, Shearson and Lehman, they had no idea what was coming because it was kept so quiet, because the SEC didn't do their job, because the Justice Department didn't do their job. There was no reporting. This was all done in the secret of night. But let me move on to another scam. The other scam is where you have Wall Street gaming the media. Tell us how they do that.
Oh, this is an incredible story. You know, Jim Cramer, the guy from Mad Money, the frenetic guy on TV.
Of course, the big mouth, yeah.
Big mouth. He ran a hedge fund for about 10 years, a decade ago, and the average rate of return he had was 23 to 24% a year. A year. Well, about 10 years later, he decided to tell how he did that. During that period, he was a CNBC commentator. And what he did was, one of his tricks was he would feed phony data, phony information on particular companies, rumors, to his co-journalists on CNBC, who would then go out and report it. Meanwhile, Cramer his hedge fund would place a bet in a certain direction. The report would come out and move the stock exactly the way Cramer wanted to move it. That's like, think about that. It would be, I'm your colleague on this show, and I feed you lies.
Yeah, and you know they're lies, and the only reason Kramer, the only reason Kramer could talk about it is because the statute of limitation on prosecuting him had passed, but nevertheless, CNBC still keeps him as an advisor, and people still tune into the program because it's corporate media believing that he has real information. And when you follow the information he gives you, it's wildly wrong most of the time. So what Wall Street does is they game the media because the media is so damn gullible and the media is so willing to buy into this idea of a corporate money frenzy.
Well, yes, and Kramer makes this very, very clear. He said something that just floored me, which we talk about in the book. He said, look, if you're not willing to do these things, you shouldn't be in the business. In other words, he's telling us it's not just him, it's all of the hedge funds that do this. Otherwise, you're going to go under. This is the name of the game. Manipulate the media, insider trading, design products that are designed to fail, high-frequency trading.
Let me ask you about high-frequency trading. This is something people don't understand. How does that scam the system? High-frequency trading.
This is like the Twilight Zone. To get into this one, they set up their computers, these very, very expensive computers, right next to the stock exchange, so they get the feed, they get the information, a few nanoseconds faster than everybody else. Then, with that information, and given what you're going to do, they see that faster than everybody else. So let's say you're on E-Trade, and you press the button, you're going to buy 100 shares of a company. Before that trade goes through, they go and buy the thing that you want and resell it to you for a few pennies more than you thought you were going to pay. And they do this millions of times a day, and they make between $5 and $20 billion from you, your mutual fund, your pension fund, by producing absolutely nothing in return.
Just by scamming you that they get the information. It's like a horse race. You already know who won the race, who's running the race, so you go ahead and bet, but then you don't share that with the people that you're taking the money from. Look, here, I got about 30 seconds. Let me just tell me yes or no. The scam system is what's working for Wall Street. It's not that they're geniuses, is it, Les?
They're geniuses at coming up with corrupt scams. They're involved in so many. They're involved in these payday loan things that they were caught. They were involved in foreclosing mortgages on people who were paying on time.
But the scams work, Les, and thankfully you're writing about them. Thanks for joining me, Les.
Thanks so much for having me.
Coming up, we'll expose the revolving door that exists between our regulatory agencies and the industries that they're supposed to be monitoring. I'm Mike Papantonio. We'll be right back with more Ring of Fire.
You're watching Free Speech TV, a network powered by the people.
Welcome back to Ring of Fire. I'm Mike Papantonio. The Food and Drug Administration is supposed to protect consumers from dangerous drugs and make sure that drug companies are doing the proper tests of their products. But thanks to the revolving door between industry and government, there are no safety checks. I have attorney and consumer advocate Daniel Nigh with me to talk about that very thing. Daniel, not much has changed with the FDA since about the 1950s when we saw their horrible, horrendous history merge with exactly what we see nowadays. I mean, they are basically in the pocket of the drug industry. They, since the 1950s, have been reasonably useless where it comes to keeping dangerous drugs off the market. But it's worse today. Take me back to the beginning of the FDA.
Absolutely. You know, Pat, back in the 1950s, we saw a horrendous example of this with Penalba, which is an antibiotic drug marketed by the Upjohn Company. Essentially, we saw that almost 20% of the population that was taking this drug had allergic reactions to the drug. Studies showed that it was less effective than other antibiotics on the market, and yet the FDA allowed it to stay around over and over and over again, even when Upjohn's own funded research showed these problems. It stayed there over and over again. And we're seeing those same problems now.
Doesn't it happen because the FDA, actually, if you think about it, they make their money through the drug companies. That's who funds the FDA. That's who keeps them in business. And in this relationship that the FDA has with the drug company is to the point now to where if you're taking a drug that hasn't been on the market for 10 years, you should be concerned, because the only way we find out about dangerous drugs is to give the drug time, because the FDA never looks at clinicals to make any meaningful decision about whether the drug is dangerous.
No, that's right. And what we see is we see this revolving door that goes back and forth between the FDA and all the big pharma executives. And so what we'll see is the same employees that are employed at the FDA, it's only a couple of years and then they'll be employed at the big pharma. So they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
Yeah, this isn't us just talking, just so the viewers can understand. I mean, there's been many looks at this. I think the most important was 1977 when it came out of Penn State University, and it was startling what was revealed, wasn't it?
That's right. In 1977, we were seeing these studies that basically, the employees of the FDA, they would act and conform based on what their higher ups told them, and they wouldn't come out and they wouldn't want to, fire the gun against their own authority. So they just sit back and they wait and they do exactly what they're told, even though they have evidence that shows a lot of these products are bad and they need to be removed off the market. In fact, in 2009, a lot of the FDA scientists came forward and said, we know that there's been a lot of problems, but our FDA higher ups told us we need to cover this up.
Well, as a matter of fact, what we saw as early as the 1977 study of the FDA, you had employees coming right out and saying, look, I was expected to lie. I was expected to cave in where it came to the pressure from the drug companies that were telling my supervisor that if I didn't do something, there's going to be some repercussions. Now, can you imagine the drug company having so much confidence in their power that they actually are telling supervisors to advise people below them to lie about things like clinical data that shows a drug has the ability to kill or cripple people? But that's what we saw out of 1977. As you point out, we saw it in the 2009 evaluation too, didn't we?
That's right. We saw that same thing happen. And on top of that, we've got this, the 510K approval is just a complete fiasco that allows them to, have a complete shield over these products. And we're seeing that same problem.
Well, how does that work, that particular approval process?
Okay, well, essentially, all they have to do is say that the product is similar to another product that's already on the market, and they get the rubber stamp to be able to, market their product as they wish. Well, what we're seeing now is we see a lot of these, they say their product's substantially similar as another product on the market, and then that product is completely recalled. But the FDA doesn't go back and then say, well, what's wrong with all these other products on the market? This is the problem we've seen with vaginal mesh, it's the problem we've seen with hips, and we see the same problem with a lot of other pharmaceutical drugs that are on the market as well.
What we're starting to see more and more, and of course they've been doing it for decades, is they'll go to a university, they'll hire professors, scientists, doctors at a university, and they'll bring them in on what they call advisory panels. These are people that these are professors that get money directly from the drug industry to write a paper. We've actually seen cases where the drug industry actually writes the paper themselves. And then they send it to the professor there at the university, the scientist, and says, look, all we need is your signature. It wasn't even written by the doctor. And so what we're seeing now more and more is we're seeing that almost at an epidemic level to where you can't even look at literature. If you look at literature and you try to figure out, well, is this truthful or not, you don't even know whether the guy's been paid to do it, do you?
No, that's exactly right. Pap, we see this every single time we get involved in reviewing documents in any case. We always see that these drug companies have a hired writer, medical writer. Their marketers tell them exactly what the medical writer wants them to write, and then the medical writer goes to whoever the doctor is at the university and gets their signature on it. The medical writer's being paid all sorts of things. This is called ghostwriting. It's become a complete, problem throughout the entire industry.
Well, it's ghostwriting, plus they'll put together these blue ribbon panels. The panels aren't people who directly work for the FDA, but they come in and advise the FDA. And so you have the government employee that's sitting here listening to the person from Harvard or Yale or Princeton in this panel of people, and nobody asks the question, oh, by the way, How much have you made working directly or indirectly for the industry over the last 10 years? And do you have a direct interest in what happens here? Those questions are never asked by the FDA bureaucrats because the people are afraid to ask that question, aren't they?
Right. The FDA know this is going on, and the entire time they actually seem to give it no weight at all. They seem to not care. I think as long as they've got the evidence that allows them to prove something or to not have to question something, they don't want to do it. It's laziness, and it's also on the part that they're trying to help out these companies.
Isn't there this belief among most Americans that once the drug, first of all, before the drug comes on the market, we believe that the FDA has done a thorough analysis of the preclinical data. We believe that. We're told that, gee, we tested it on this many rats and only this many rats died or this many rats became ill. And then we go back, and I've seen it so many times, to where that is all a lie. But the American public believes that the FDA is doing the testing themselves, don't they? The American public believes they're the ones that watched the results of whether or not the rat died or not.
Oh, it's completely horrendous. Many times these drugs get to the market without a single test ever being conducted. People think these things are being tested and they think that they're safe, and doctors oftentimes think that they're safe drugs, and there's no testing at all to show any support of these drugs. Many times the tests that they'll go to the doctor and they'll say, hey, we've seen clinical trials in these, have nothing to do with their drug at all that they've been pushing to these doctors.
Isn't the other part of it, we expect that once the drug's on the market, you would assume that there are ongoing follow-up clinical studies that are performed, and that the FDA comes back in and requires and demands clinical studies. They say, well, the drug's on the market, it's been there for 3 years, let's go back and see how many people have died from your product. There aren't even organized clinical studies to tell us that, are there?
Right. Oftentimes there are no studies or no follow-up to show just how bad the product is. On top of that, they may show all sorts of adverse events, and they still don't do these studies. In fact, the FDA just allows it to keep continuing to be covered up.
One thing we start seeing more and more, Daniel, and I know you see it in your practice, is you start seeing that the drug manufacturer, they actually see that there's a problem in the preclinicals. They see that first of all, they may see there's real no efficacy, and there's no real use of the drug. I mean, you don't even need the drug. And second of all, they'll see bad clinicals. And so what ends up happening is as the drug moves into the market, they'll calculate how many years can they keep the drug on the market before the lawsuits start. Don't you see that pre-calculation process?
All the time. In fact, what we'll see is 80 to 90% of the research on these drugs is funded by the drug company. And what we will see is that oftentimes these studies will go a year and a half down the road. They're looking terribly unsuccessful for the drug company. And guess what they do? They pull the funding because they don't ever want these results to be published. And we will see study after study where funding is pulled, research is never published. And so the public never gets to know about it. The FDA doesn't consider it. Rather than forcing any time a study is started, it should be listed. It should have to be something that the public can discover, and they should be able to know why the funding is pulled.
Daniel, would you agree that, we'd like to think that this administration, they came in talking about honesty and how we're going to be straightforward and transparent. This administration has been a miserable failure with the FDA, just like the Bush administration and the Clinton administration before them. Hasn't it been just as miserable?
It's sad. I mean, I would have expected that we'd see a lot more out of Obama's administration, but unfortunately we haven't at this point.
As a matter of fact, we're seeing that FDA become stronger with corporate hacks that move into that industry. Daniel Nigh, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Pat.
That's it for this week's Ring of Fire, but you can keep up with us throughout the week online at ringofireradio.com, on Twitter at Ring of Fire, and on Facebook. I'm Mike Papantonio. We'll see you next week right here on Ring of Fire. Free Speech TV doesn't take corporate money, and that's why your financial support is so important to us. Viewer voices, not corporate sponsors, fuel Free Speech TV and drive many of the program decisions. And you can help protect free speech today with your donations. More people means more power. Each donation that you give brings more power and more programming, and it gives us the possibility of change in this democracy. Our programming equips viewers with vital tools, resources, contacts, and examples of how to collectively build alternative and sustainable solutions to very serious community problems. Please donate now. Bring these organizing tools into your community. Everyone should have access to the news, real news, not corporate news. They should have access to information that's forming the world around them. Our goal is to keep you and everybody involved. We aim to reach every viewer possible because we are in this together. Go online to freespeech.org and help support independent, honest news journalism. Free Speech TV doesn't take corporate money, and that's why your financial support is so important to us. Viewer voices, not corporate sponsors, fuel Free Speech TV and drive many of the program decisions. And you can help protect free speech today with your donations. Your support helps keep information flowing. It helps hold things together. We can hold corporate media accountable only if we have a voice to do that. And right now, Free Speech TV is one of the few voices out there that is going to tell the story regardless of what corporate America wants us to say. I'm Mike Papantonio, and I'll be with you every week telling you the truth that you will not hear on corporate media.